The U.S. Navy would not simply defend itself, it would answer with a strike so precise and devastating that an enemy base vanished from the map. But before that hammer fell, the sea was calm, the horizon steady, and the crew aboard a carrier group believed it was just another watch. Then came the first faint echoes on radar, growing into a storm of fire. In seconds, survival depended on instinct and training. What began as routine turned into a battle that showed why the world's most powerful fleet is never to be tested. Inside the destroyer's Combat Information Center, the air was cool and heavy, filled with the hum of machines and the quiet rhythm of sailors watching their screens. For hours, nothing changed. The Red Sea stretched out in silence, the radar sweeping in endless circles, each pass returning nothing more than background noise. To most, it felt like another uneventful watch, but the ocean rarely stays quiet for long. Then it happened. Small echoes flickered across the SPY radar display, brief, sharp returns that didn't belong. At first, they could almost be dismissed as clutter or interference, but the sailors who had lived through countless drills knew better. The blips were steady, they were moving, and they were fast. A single word broke the calm: contacts. Heads turned, voices quickened, and the atmosphere shifted. The captain's order came swiftly: General Quarters. Klaxons sounded through the ship, their piercing cry cutting through every passageway. Doors slammed, boots pounded against metal, and sailors rushed to their battle stations. Within moments, the destroyer was no longer a quiet vessel. She was alive, every part of her crew locked into the rhythm of combat. In the command center, calculations streamed faster than human thought. The radar's computer systems ran millions of comparisons, stripping away the uncertainty. The data left no doubt: inbound weapons. The distance was closing, the time to impact already shrinking. Seconds mattered now. The destroyer's engines roared, surging her forward in defense of the carrier she shadowed. Orders snapped through headsets, each one a thread holding chaos together. Young sailors, many barely past their teens, steadied their hands over consoles, following procedures drilled into them 1,000 times before. The sea outside looked calm, but inside the ship, every heartbeat carried the weight of survival. The first blips had become something more: an approaching storm, the opening move in a fight that could not be avoided. The radar display sharpened, peeling away the mystery. What had begun as faint echoes now showed their true form: anti-ship cruise missiles. Long, fast, and deadly, they skimmed the surface of the sea, closing the distance with relentless purpose. They were built for one reason: to break through defenses and sink ships. And now they were racing straight toward the strike group. The announcement came over the speakers: "Missile inbound!" The three words froze time. Training took over where fear wanted to rule. Inside the Gravely's control center, sailors moved with drilled precision, fingers flying across consoles, systems armed in seconds. The order to fire was given. The ship's vertical launch cells opened, and 2 standard missiles leapt skyward, engines roaring as they cut into the night. Their trajectory was swift and certain, climbing before angling down toward their targets. Eyes locked onto screens, waiting for the impact that would decide whether the carrier behind them lived or died. A bright bloom registered on the radar. One target gone, then another. Yet debris filled the air and sea, sharp fragments that could still rip into steel. To be certain, the captain gave the order again. 2 more interceptors streaked away, hunting what remained. Moments later, the final signals disappeared from the radar. The destroyer had struck true. A wave of relief rippled through the ship, but it carried no celebration. Everyone knew this was only one round in a fight that was far from finished. For every missile defeated, more could be waiting just beyond the horizon. The Gravely's crew stayed braced, weapons hot, hearts steady. The first attack had been stopped, but the night was not yet over. No sooner had the tension eased than new contacts appeared. They were smaller, slower, but steady in their approach. This time, not missiles, drones, 4 of them, crawling across the radar at a speed that seemed almost harmless. Yet everyone knew the danger in underestimating them. Each carried explosives, enough to cripple equipment or take lives if allowed to slip through. The destroyer's captain studied the data. To fire another missile would mean wasting millions against weapons that cost almost nothing. That was the enemy's tactic. Bleed defenses dry with swarms of cheap machines. Instead, he waited, letting the drones come closer. The crew tightened their grip on their stations, nerves coiled tight. At 10 miles, the ship turned, exposing its hidden weapon. The close-in weapon system, an automated cannon with radar eyes and relentless speed. Its sensors locked on, tracking each drone with cold precision. 3 miles. The order was given. The gun came alive with a thunder that shook the decks. Streams of glowing rounds stitched across the sky, cutting through the drones in bursts of fire. One by one, they fell, breaking apart and splashing into the dark sea. In less than a heartbeat, the threat was gone, reduced to nothing but drifting wreckage. Destroying the threats at sea was only half the battle. To end the danger, the source had to be found. But Yemen was no simple battlefield. Years of war had scarred the land, leaving ruins, armed factions, and shifting lines of control. Missiles and drones could be launched from hidden valleys, abandoned villages, or desert shelters. The landscape itself seemed designed to hide the hand that fired the shot. This was where technology became the sailor's ally. Far above the earth, satellites searched the night. Their thermal eyes painted the deserts in strange colors, cold blues and purples where sand cooled after sunset, sudden bursts of heat where nothing should burn. Against the emptiness, the smallest warmth stood out. Analysts studied the images, a pocket of heat, then another, far from towns or roads. It was not natural. Buried beneath sand, something was alive with energy. A clue. To confirm, an aircraft swept overhead. Drones circled high, cameras fixed, recording every angle. Signals intelligence planes listened, catching whispers of radio chatter carried on the air. Together, the pieces formed a picture. Beneath the desert surface, tunnels and storage sites held the very weapons that had threatened the fleet. Now, they were marked. Once the hidden sites were confirmed, the response began to take shape. The carrier group would not simply wait for another attack. It would move first, with precision. Orders spread across the decks like a current. Pilots briefed in ready rooms, missile crews checked coordinates, and planners traced the paths that weapons would follow across hostile ground. Timing was everything. The destroyers prepared their Tomahawk cruise missiles, long-range weapons built to slip low and strike deep. Each one carried a detailed map inside its guidance system, programmed to weave through valleys, hug terrain, and avoid enemy eyes. In the skies, FA-18 Super Hornets were armed with guided bombs, waiting for the moment to launch. It was not chaos, it was choreography. The destroyers would fire first, their missiles smashing open the doors of the bunkers. Minutes later, the aircraft would arrive, guided by laser pods and satellite data, dropping heavier blows straight into the wounds already opened. On the carrier's deck, the roar of engines built as jets lined up. Below deck, sailors tracked every movement of the plane. It was a measured storm, crafted not out of rage, but calculation. And once set in motion, it could not be called back. The night sky over the desert was lit with streaks of fire. 30 minutes later, they arrived. The first explosions cracked open the sand, tearing into entrances carved into rock and earth. Dust and fire surged upward, painting the darkness in sudden light. Then came the jets. The Super Hornets roared across the night, steady and fast. Beneath their wings hung the bombs designed for this moment, each guided not by chance, but by the sharp eyes of targeting pods. Lasers carved invisible paths, marking the bunkers still smoking from the missile strikes. Bombs released. The ground trembled as precision-guided weapons drove straight into the broken tunnels. A second wave of explosions erupted, louder, heavier, punching deeper into the hidden chambers. For a heartbeat, silence followed. Then came the chain reaction. Stored warheads and missiles ignited, one after another, sending fireballs clawing into the sky. From miles away, sailors on watch could see the glow on the horizon. In that glow, the threat was erased. An arsenal buried in the desert was gone. When the dust settled, the sea was calm again. The carrier group continued its watch, planes lifting from the deck, as if nothing had happened. But everyone who lived through that night knew better. They had seen how quickly the ordinary can turn into survival, and how swiftly survival can turn into decisive strength. The enemy had struck and lost, their hidden weapons reduced to ash beneath the desert. For the sailors, it was another reminder. Out here, there is no room for hesitation. The ocean remembers, and the Navy always answers.